Hello everyone and welcome to my Java tutorial series. In this particular episode I'm going to be going over if statements and switch statements. Now, in the past I've gone over input, some basic input, some basic output, some various math stuff, messing with variables, that kind of thing. But I've also not really covered how to actually really make programs. I mean, hey, it's cool. I can kind of print out some stuff and I can kind of do some mathy stuff, but I can't really say, hey, I want to add 3 plus 3 and then add that, or, do 3 plus 3 minus 3 and subtract that, because I can't analyze the input and say, depending on what they did, do different actions. I would have to literally either add every single time or subtract every time. I can't add or subtract. I have to do both or none, So what if statements and switch statements will allow us to do is analyze the input that we get and do different actions depending on that input. So it's if statements and switch statements sometimes are like the building blocks of programs. Without them, you can't really do anything. Now, they may not necessarily be always an if statement every single time. A lot more advanced programs may not use them as often, but the same principle still applies in that you have to sort of get an input, and if it's this, then you have to do this. If it's not, then you have to do this other thing. That's literally what an if statement is. If this, do this. And in some cases, if not this, then do this. So anyway, now the other thing is an if statement is incredibly easy to understand. And I mean, yes, I say that being a programmer and I've dealt with it a whole bunch of times. But even when I hadn't known what it was, I looked at it and I'm like, oh, that makes perfect sense. Because it's one of the statements in Java that it reads almost exactly like an English sentence. I mean, albeit there are some symbols in it that aren't actual words, but it makes a lot of sense. So to write out an if statement, I'm just going to write it out here, and then I'll tell you what the different parts are. So we'll do, let's see, whoops. Okay, there we go. So if you don't already know, because like I said, this is incredibly easy to understand, and since I told you what exactly an if statement does, if this, then this should make sense if you kind of look at it and you think about it. So basically, we have the word if. That makes sense, right? We all know what if means. So we have the word if. And then we have parenthesis, and the parenthesis is necessary because you have to, you put what you want to analyze inside of there. So that's sort of what you want to analyze. We basically want to compare month number to 1. And it's very important that you put two equal signs instead of 1, because if you remember from whenever we went over variables, to create a variable, I mean, we can even look up here to really see this. So, for instance, string month name equals empty string. Well, if we put equals 1, we would actually be setting month number equal to 1. And you're like, well, why would they allow you to do that in the middle of an if statement? Well, I'm not going to go into that, but a lot of times it's very useful to create variables in places like in the middle of an if statement like that, because they won't be used for a very long amount of time. It'll just be used for a short amount of time, and then it'll be gone from the memory. It's beyond the scope of stuff right now. It's kind of actually a programmer joke right there, because it has to do with scope. Anyway, whatever. Beyond the scope. Anyway. Oh, I shouldn't have said that, because now I'm laughing at it. Okay. Okay, back on topic. I apologize. Okay, so you don't want to do this, because that's going to be setting month number equal to 1, and then it's confused because it can't convert all the. It's just not working. So you don't want to do that. You want to make sure that it's equals equals. In Java, one equal sign is this literally is this. So you're setting it equal to. Two equal signs is a little bit different. It's saying is equivalent to. So it's sort of more of an asking a question. So is this equivalent to would be more of what you're saying. The if part being the equals being equivalent to. So the if is equivalent to. So if we wanted to read this correctly, like as an actual sentence, it would be if month number is equivalent to 1, do this, do this. So it makes a lot of sense. Now we could actually have 1 be another variable. So we could have, if this is equivalent to the input or something like that, then do this or something like that. But we want to actually analyze the input and see if it's equal to a pre-existing number. So if the number's 1, we want to make sure that the thing that we're printing out is January. Now what I've done is essentially, I'm asking for the different numbers of the months. So, if it's 1, in this case, we're going to be printing out January because that's the first month. If it's 2, we'll print out February. If it's 3, we'll print out March. If it's 12, we'll print out December. So on and so on for all the different months. I'm not going to do all 12 of them. I'll do a couple of them, but I'm not going to go through and do all 12 because that would just be a lot of repetitive typing. But it's just sort of a pretty simple example that, is easy to do without having to come up with some long, exaggerated thing. So, anyway, let's see. Okay, so let's do a couple more of these before I start showing a couple other things about how this works. One other thing. You do need to make sure that you put these braces here because we have 2 commands. Let me demonstrate this real quick. If I remove these, well, let me actually run this so you can see what this does. Okay, so if I do 0, I don't get anything at all. Just window disappears. If I do 1, I get January. So I did 0. It was looking at month number is like, well, month number 0, that's not equal to 1, so just don't do any of this at all. It saw it was 1 and then it printed out January. So, however, if we do this, watch what's going to happen. If I do 1, same exact thing. However, the problem arises whenever I do any other number. So let's do 12. This happens. Why are we getting completely blank screen here? Well, if we don't add the braces there, what happens is by default, without any braces, an if statement will only execute the command directly below it. So, we could write it, it would look better if we did like this. So it would be only executing this command. Now again, white space doesn't actually matter, but just for, the sake of making it look nicer, I'll write it like this. So it's only going to be executing this command. But this command will always be executed every single time because it's not part of the if statement. So, if this is 1, it's going to change the month name to January. But this is going to get executed every time because this is not connected to the if statement. So even if it's 0, it's just going to analyze, well, is it 0? Okay, no. The only thing I need to do if it is 1 is this, so whatever, just move on to the next command, which is this one. Which, since we initialized month name to be an empty string, that's why we get this. That's why we don't get anything here, because month name doesn't actually have anything in it. So hopefully that makes sense. Now, most of the time, whenever I'm doing this, it's a good sort of programming habit to write the braces, even if you don't need to. So even if it, let's just do this. So even if it was just one command in there, it's good to write the braces anyway, because let's say that you need to add another command in later. Well, if you forget to put the braces, then you'll really have an error. So if I wrote it like this, whoops, like that. I write it like this originally. I'm like, okay, I need to add another command to this so that it'll print it to the screen. Let's do this. Okay, move on. And say Let's say I actually forget to put the braces. Well, then I have a problem because it's going to be doing the same thing that I had earlier happen. So it's always a good habit to put the braces anyway, even if you don't need them, just so that you'll, first of all, you'll know what is actually in the if statement, and secondly, if you do need to add some more code later, you can make sure that it'll actually be added. So that's my little spiel about good programming habits. But anyway, okay, moving on. let's write out a couple more of these. Month number equals 2. Another programming tip, copy and paste is your friend. So let's just change this to February. I always misspell February. February. Is that spelled right? February. February. I think that's right. Let me check. I want to make sure I get it right. February. Okay. I don't know who came up with these names for the months, but they should be fired because it's weird and hard to pronounce. At least February. Okay, so 3, and then we can do. I'll do 6 of these. I'm not going to do all 12. I'll do half of them because copy and paste will allow me to get it done fairly quickly. April 4 and May. So all I'm doing is changing the months and the numbers for each one of these. January, February, March, April, May, June. Okay, so there's 6 of them. So now, if we run this, we could type 0. Nothing is going to happen because it's going through all of them, and 0. So 0 is none of them. Now we could type 1, we'll get January, just like before. We could also type 4, and we'll get April. Or we could type 5, and we'll get May. So you can see exactly how useful this is, because you're like, okay, different inputs, different things. And really, we could type as many things as we wanted inside of these 2 braces here. You don't have to just type a few things. Many people will have like huge, long list of code typed out for these. And you could actually nest these. So what do I mean by nesting? Well, let me show you this. If you'll notice, well, actually, no, I didn't add it. I was doing that in testing. So let me do string season name. And I'll go ahead and initialize that too, just in case, because it's good to initialize it, just in case. At least for that one, because, never mind. Okay, so season, let's see. If, okay, we'll do if month number equals 1, season name equals winter. Okay, so you can have these nested. So we'll do one if statement. Oh, that's correct. Do this, do this, do this. Oh, another if statement. Okay, month number equals 1. Do this one. Now, it's guaranteed that if that this is going to equal 1, if this is here, but we could actually do actually let me rewrite this entirely. Let me flip these. It'd be better if we flipped these. So what we could do technically is this: if month number equals 1, and let me go ahead and introduce some other concept to you here in just a second. I think March is still technically part of winter. Or maybe spring. I don't know. I don't really care right now. Let's just add February as part of winter, and that's it. We'll just do January and February as winter. So I could stick these. It'd be better if I stick it like this. So, okay. So basically, what we're doing is, if the month number is 1, we're going to do season name is winter. If it's 1, do this. If it's 2, do this. Now we know it's going to be 1 every single time, so it's kind of pointless to put this statement here. But here is where we can make things interesting. there's several different symbols that you can add to not only if statements, but all kinds of different statements, other than just if statements, to sort of say different things and make the comparisons more advanced. We don't have to just do equals. We could do greater than. Okay, we could do less than. Now, whenever you're doing the greater than or less than, it's very important to have the equals to the right of the symbol. You cannot do equals greater. It's not work. It has to be either greater or less than and then the equal symbol. Okay, so less than equals. Now, you don't even have to have the equals. You know, you could just do greater than. But if we wanted it to be accurate for this, since we're doing 1 through 12, we would have to do greater than 0. Because it won't include whatever the number to the right is. So it would have to be greater, or actually, I'm sorry, not less than, greater than 0. Or we could just do greater than or equal to 1. Either way will work. Okay, but it's just this is greater than or equal to 1, and that will include whatever number is, or it's just greater than 1, which won't include the 1, but just every number above it. So the greater than without including the actual number is useful if you're dealing with decimals, because you'll have to be like, okay, if you did greater than 0, this would basically give you every single positive number as an option. But if you just do greater than, or equal to 0, you'll also get 0, but maybe you don't want 0 to be part of the answers. So, this is only the difference between the greater than and the equals to is only really all that useful whenever you're dealing with decimals. That's where it could be more useful. But whenever you're dealing with integers, it doesn't really matter which one you use. You just have to make sure that you subtract 1 depending on which one you're using. Hopefully that makes sense. It's pretty basic math. And then, of course, you got your less than, same concept. Okay, so let's just do greater than 1. Greater than or equal to 1. We could do that way. So basically, if the month number is anything greater than or equal to 1, it's going to say the season is winter. And let's also go ahead and print out plus, we can do space plus season name. So I'm just doing the string concatenation like I did show in one of the videos. I forget which one it was, but I think it was output. So you can do the string concatenation. I'm adding the variable plus a space plus the other variable with the plus signs. And then I will just do the exact same thing here. Perfect. No, that's, whoops. I did it in the wrong spot. That's okay. There. Okay, so basically what we're going to get is, we do 1, January winter. We could also do 2, February winter, because it's still winter, because it's greater than 2. If we did a 0, nothing's going to happen. So that's sort of how that works. However, we don't really want to have every number greater than 1 be winter, because only, by the time you get around to March, it's getting near spring. I think spring actually happens midway through March, so we can consider March as spring if we want to, depending on what part of the country you're in, really. So what we can do is, instead of just doing greater than or equal to 1, because that would include every single number in every month as being winter, we can say is equal to 1, and then we can do some special symbols that we've got here. Not only the greater than and less than symbols, but we've also got this, and then we've also got these. And I think there's this one too, yeah. So we've got these set of 3 symbols. Now it is very important that you put 2 of them. There's 2 of those, and then there's just 1 of these. Okay, so the AND symbols right here, which is, the little special character above the 7, you've got these OR symbols, which is the character. If you look above the Enter key, there's like I guess it's the backslash. If you do Shift and press the backslash key, it's those little straight lines there. I'm specifically saying that that's where it is, because it took me a little bit to find it on the keyboard. The first time I saw it, I didn't know where it was because it's very, very rarely used key. But anyway, and then you have the exclamation point symbol. Okay, so basically what the AND symbol will do, and again, it's very important to have two. You need to have two of them. The AND symbol will allow you to say, okay, month number is equivalent to 1, and some other number is this, and some other number is this, and you can put as many of them as you want. So we do month number equals 2. So we can explicitly say that only 1 and 2 are going to be the winter's months, because, you know, if month number is 1 or 2, it's going to be winter. And I shouldn't have said or. If month number is 1 and 2, it's going to be winter. But see, you know, that makes sense because, okay, so 1 and 2, you know, that'll get set to winter. But month number would actually literally have to be both 1 and 2 at the same time for this to work. So we can't use and. I shouldn't have put and. Because and is better suited when you have two different kinds of variables, because you can't have the same variable be two different things. So if you wanted to analyze two different variables at the same time, say, you know, say I was getting the season and the month number from the user. Okay, so, you know, if the month is this number and the season is this, then it must be this month, or something like that, right? So, you know, I could analyze two different ones like that. But if I use the or, it's better. I shouldn't have put and. I'm sorry. I'm doing the wrong thing. But if I put the or symbols, this is going to say if month number is 1 or if the month number is 2. You know, and I could do if the month number is 12 or 11 or 10 for, you know, the early winter months. Then that would work just fine. So what I can do this now is I can do 3. I'm going to get March, because this is going down to here where I haven't actually put the winter section. Okay, so we know now that we know now that that it's working, and that it's not doing any numbers greater than 3, or 3 or greater, because, you know, otherwise it would trigger that. Okay, so we do 0. Okay, we know it's not doing any numbers less than 1. We do 1. January winter. We do 2, February winter. Perfect. So that works exactly like we wanted it to be, or wanted it to work. So cool. Now, if we use the not symbol, this wouldn't work in this particular circumstance, but I'm just going to show you how it works. Let's do this. Let's see. Let's do it with the 3. I'll do the not symbol with the 3 down here. So let's just say that there are a few circumstances in which you could use this, but anyway, now anytime you want to add something like this, you normally you just want to use one equal sign. You're always going to be using one equal sign usually, but you'll put the equal sign to the right of the exclamation point like this, and then what this is going to say, if month number is not equal to 3, put March. So what's going to happen is it's going to print, if I type in any number except 3, it's going to actually print March. So if I do 1, it's going to do January winter, and then it's also going to print March winter. So actually this should not be there. Now if I do 2, it's also going to do the exact same thing, because it's saying if it's not equal to 3, then then do what's here. So it's going to do this command for every single number except 3. So this is sort of a good thing to do exclusions with. So you want to do a command every single time except for this, this, and this. So, you know, you could do month number is not equal to 3, or month number is not equal to, I don't know, 0, something like that. You know, you could do different certain numbers that you don't want this to fire on. But if I do 3, let's just do 3 right now, nothing's going to happen because we've set it to not do anything on 3. So that's sort of how the not thing works. That's actually pretty much all of the different sort of symbols that are involved with the if statements, or really any statements. You can use these for pretty much any statements that you encounter. So, alright, that's that. Now, here's another thing you can do. So we've got our nested if statements like this, and you can nest them as many times as you want to. That's sort of what this is called, nesting. You can nest up, 5, 6, 7, hundreds of them if you even want to. But what we can also do is we can do else statements. Now, an else statement is pretty cool. Let's go all the way down here, and we can do an else statement down here. Now, you have to have an if statement to do an else statement. An else statement is inherently part of an if statement. It's not really its own statement. It's sort of an extension of an if statement. So you can't just type an else statement out there by itself, because it actually has to have an if statement to fire. An if says if this then this. An else says is sort of an extension of that sentence. If this then this. Otherwise do this. Or if this then this, else do this. Okay? So we just do else. That's it. We don't even have to type like parentheses something, because what's going to happen is this is going to analyze. It's going to say, if month number is equivalent to 6, okay, do all of this stuff. If it's not equal to 6, it's going to, this is what this else is saying. If it's not equal to 6, if it's whatever's inside of here, if it's not to the exact of what that is, this else is going to fire, and it's going to do this. So if you had sort of a situation of where, okay, I need to do this, or I need to do this, and that's just in every single time. And so you have your else statement of where, so basically, let's go back to this example of where we have the not here. So if month number is not equal to 3, then you do something. Well, what if it is equal to 3? Then we can have an else statement dealing with that one specific example of being 3. So if it is 3, it's going to go to the else statement and do something. There's sort of how that works. Of course, in this case, the else statement will be everything else, and the month number, if and only if the month number is 6, then the else will fire. Or I'm sorry, no. If the month number is 6, it will do this. Otherwise, for everything else, for every single other number that we would possibly get, it's going to be else. So 1, 2, 3, 4, all that stuff. So I really overemphasized that. I apologize, but okay, let's actually type something in here. Month name, or let's just copy this. And we can type invalid month because we didn't actually type 6. But you're going to see a problem with this, actually. 1, it's going to be January winter, invalid month. So really, the else statement here is not working all that well, because we put it all the way at the bottom of all this other stuff. So it's going to be if this, if this, if this, if this, if this, if this, otherwise the else statement. That's kind of how it would seem, because the else statement is all the way here at the bottom. You're going to do all these if statements, and then if it's none of those if statements, you do the else. But unfortunately, the else is inherently tied to only one if statement. So any other if statement, it's not going to consider that one, which is why it fired, even though we had typed in a number that it had analyzed up here. So because what you would really want to do for an actual program is to get all of the inputs that you would ever possibly need. So let's say that you're making like a calculator or something. So you create inputs that are going to be accepting all of the numbers from 0 to 9, and if the user type, maybe they're typing in the numbers, they're not just hitting buttons. if the user types in anything but 0 through 9, you would have an else statement. So you'd have if 0 do this, if 1 do this, if 2 do this, and so on to 9. If 9 do this, else. For anything else that they type in, invalid character. So you could do that. So you have like the else is usually 90% of the time the statement that's going to catch errors. It's sort of an error catching statement. So you have all of your if statements collecting the actual input to do things with your program. The else statement just is kind of down there at the bottom to say, okay, well, you had an error, so, because this is an invalid character because it wasn't any of the if statements that we had, so we're going to do this, But unfortunately, the only way to really get that to work well is to have an if statement after an else statement after every one of these if statements. And that's just going to get really cumbersome. So what they did for the Java stuff, instead of just having just a raw if statement, I can't talk. Okay. Okay. Instead of having just a raw if statement, or just a raw else statement, we can do sort of a hybrid. So what we would really want to do is else if, else if, else if, else if, and this would just be if. So now what we're doing is we're more or less combining all of these together. So what's going to happen is it's going to say, okay, if month number equals 1 or is equal to 2, we're going to do all of this stuff. Oh, it's not that. Okay, next one. Else if the month number is equal to 3. Well, it's not that one. Okay, move on to this one. It's not that one. Do this one. It's not that one. Do this one. It's not that one. Else statement. Bam. So it will actually go through all of these sort of sequentially and then get to the else statement. If, let's say, if it does this one, gets to this one right here. Let's say it is this one. It'll do this, and then it'll jump all the way out of all of these else statements and go down to here. So let me show what I mean by this. Let's do 2. February winter, done. There was no invalid month. There was nothing else. It was just that, and it jumped out. It didn't even. One other thing that's really great about using else ifs, because really you don't have to have this else statement here. This else statement is an extension of an if statement. It's not technically, so it doesn't technically have to be there. It's only there if you want the option of it to be there. So we could take it out if we wanted to, and we could still use the else if. It's always like 90% of the time good idea to use else ifs instead of just a bunch of if statements if you have them, because instead of just analyzing each if statement independent of each other, because that's what it will do, is if I didn't have all of these else statements, because what it was doing before is when it was just if statements, it would say if month number equals 1 or equals 2, do this. And let's say that I do 1, right? We know that it's going to be this one here. But even if it is 1, it's going to do this, and it's going to say, okay, do all of this. But then it's going to do this one anyway, because that's the next line of code. And it's not actually tied to the other if statement. When it gets to this line of code right here that I have highlighted, technically it doesn't even know that the other if statement existed. It's just going down the code. So it's going to do this anyway. So it's going to do this calculation. It's like, well, no, it's not that. Okay, get out of this. And then it's going to do every single one of these other calculations, if I didn't have these else statements. Let me just do this. It's going to do every single one of these other calculations because they're each an independent if statement. So if you don't have the else part, of all of these lines of if statements that you have, they're not going to be joined together, and it's going to cause a lot of extra calculation time. Now, for such a small program like this, it's instantaneous, and I could even have like probably 30 or 40 of these if statements before I even notice just the tiniest amount of problem. Because really, it goes through it all so very quickly, that's not that big of a deal. But you have to just be very careful with how you start doing these, because you don't want to get in the habit of just writing it so it's having to do every single calculation every time. Because first of all, not only is it bad for computer efficiency, it's also bad because maybe you do make a mistake somewhere. You want to make sure that all those if statements are tied together if they're supposed to be, because you don't want to accidentally get to the end and have an else statement that just gets fired every single time because it's not tied with all of the other if statements. It's only tied with one of them. So hopefully that makes sense. Because I didn't say this one important crucial part. I forgot the most important part of what I was saying. If it's with an else statement, if the else statement is here, because they're all tied together, let's say that it gets to the top one here. If month number equals 1 or 2, and it's 2. Well, it'll do this. And it's not going to even calculate any of these other things because it knows that it's this one. So if it's this one, how can it possibly be the third one? Because we haven't even done any other commands aside from the if statements. And technically, because they're all chained together, you can't have any statements in between the if statements. So if you want them to be chained together like that, you have to have them all together. So just from a logical standpoint, if they have to be all in a row, you can't even put, if I put one statement in here, let me do just a simple thing like this. I would get an error because it says, okay, you've broken the chain. There is no other if statement I can go to. This one would have to be the beginning of the chain again. So what would happen is it would get to here, and then it would reanalyze what month number is, because it's like, okay, the chain was broken, commands were put in, between the two different if statements. It could have changed month number. Let's analyze it again and then start over. But if we don't do that, there is no way that month number could have possibly been changed. So it just skips all of this and goes down to the bottom. So let's say you do have 30 of them. If it's the first one and you don't have the else if, it's going to do all 30 calculations anyway. But if you do have the else if, guess what? It skips straight to the bottom and you can continue on. The only other problem that remains is, this is sort of something that you get into, much more advanced, sort of getting around the fact that with if statements, you would actually have to go through all 30 of them to get to the one at the very bottom. Let's say you're analyzing numbers 1 through 30. Well, let's say the number's 30. You would have to do 30 calculations to find out if it is 30. Really what you would want to do is say, okay, the number is 30, and then decide what to do upon seeing whether the number's 30, rather than having to do 30 calculations to find out if it's 30 and then do something. But that's a more advanced topic. So anyway, for right now, you have this. Okay, so switch statements. I do apologize for some inconsistencies in some of the things I was saying. I'm messing up my words here and there and rambling on a little bit. I do apologize for that. But anyway, let's get rid of all of this. And we're going to do switch statements. Now, switch statements are very similar to if statements. There are some very important differences and some very important similarities. They're used for different things. Honestly, though, switch statements are not that common. They're good if you're wanting to do sort of GUIs that are based off of just typing numbers in. So, those old, I don't know, most people nowadays haven't really played them unless you're older. I've actually played a couple. But there used to be like some of the first video games that ever came out, like ever. I'm talking like, computers were just invented. They go with video games. The first ones ever made were console based. There were no real graphics. It was just sort of console text adventure things. So it would present you with different things. It'd be like, do you want to attack the creature? Drink a health potion, defend yourself, I don't want to battle the creature. You'd have different options listed, and beside every option would be a number. So you would type a number, and that would be sort of essentially like quote unquote clicking on it. So instead of clicking on it, you would just type a number and it would see that number and go. So if you wanted to do a GUI system like that, switch statements are perfect for that. Although with more modern stuff nowadays where we have all the graphics and stuff, switch statements have become a little bit more outdated. But they were very useful back in the day. But I'm going to go over them anyway because you may find an occasion on which you want to use one. I have every now and then. So anyway, switch statements. So you want to first write the word switch, and then in parentheses you're going to tell it sort of what to switch on. And when I say switch on, what we're going to do is this is actually a good way to get around the problem that I mentioned more earlier about where we have to do 30 calculations to determine, the number. Now, I did say that was a more advanced topic. Switch statements aren't the ideal solution just because they have some limitations, but it is a more basic solution than some of the more advanced ways of dealing with it, which would include you'd be using like GUIs and stuff. But anyway, so we could do switch, and what this is going to do is we just tell it what variable we're using. And essentially we're going to provide it with a list of all of the possible inputs we could ever get. So we go back to the example of we're looking for numbers 1 through 30. We could write out all of the different things for 1 through 30, and we would just we'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. And it would look at whatever variable we're using to represent those things, and it would say, okay, let's see, okay, the variable that you have, it is 12, and it just goes down the list, 1, 2, 3, let's see, 12, there it is, and it does that command. It doesn't have to analyze it every time. It doesn't say, okay, if it's this number, well, it's not that number. If it's this number, well, it's not that number. If it's this number, it's not that number. It's literally like a list. It says, okay, 12, there it is, 12, and it does that command. Alright, so that's sort of how that works. Now, in our example that we're using for the months, we want to analyze month number. So we just put that in there. That's all we have to put. Alright, we just put month number because that's the variable we need to look at. So then we need to add the braces, and the braces here are mandatory. This is not like an if statement where we can say, well, if it's only one command, we don't have to put the braces. We need the braces, okay? You have to have them. Now we're going to tab over. Now, if you've wondered sometimes why I have tabbed over, it's just sort of like a nuance of programming. Every time you have one of those sections of braces, everything inside of the braces is tabbed over just so that it looks nicer. So, for instance, all the way up here at the top, where it's all the way to the left of the screen. But then we have a brace, so we tab over, and everything's here. And then we have another brace, so we tab over again. So it's kind of, you can kind of keep track of the way that the program is structured by looking at how far the tabs go in some sections. So you can kind of keep track of what things go with what sections of code, because they're always going to be in those blocks like that. So, and it's just a little nuance of programming. You don't have to do it, but it's kind of standard everywhere, just to kind of help communicate what's going on. But again, Java ignores whitespace, so you don't really have to do that. Anyway, moving on, I'm getting off topic. I'm sorry. I've been talking nonstop for 43 minutes. Give me a break. 44 minutes now. Okay, so switch statement. Let's just do the first one. So what we would type is we don't just type 1. It's not going to understand that. We have to type the word case. Okay. For some reason, switch statements don't have the same. Whenever I talked about doing the tab, it knocked it over automatically. For whatever reason, switch statements ignore this rule. I don't know why they decided that switch statements would be different, but they are. So, anyway, they don't go by that rule for whatever reason. Case and then we type what the number we want to use is, 1, colon. And so that's what we do to give it, to sort of, quote unquote, add it to the list, because we are sort of making a list. So instead of, because if humans were making a list, we would just say, numbers of the months, and then we just type 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. In this case, we have to do literally the word case, and then 1, colon. And everything after the colon is what would be executed. So we could literally just do a space and then just type something. So, let's see. We want to do month name equals January. And then we could just do an enter, whoops, use semicolon. And option dot show message dialog. Okay, well, crap, I didn't want compare parent component. Null, and we do, sorry, okay, month name. There. Okay, so that's literally all we have to do for that. And you'll notice that we're not using another set of braces, even though there are 2 commands. The reason for this is that Java knows, and this is why we actually have to specifically put the case, the word case, the number 1, and then the colon, because Java will see that set of things, and until it sees another one of those, or it's one of 2 things, until it sees another one of these, or it sees this. Then, if it sees either one of those, it'll stop, basically, and continue on to the next thing. So we could just type out as many commands as we want to, and not have to put another brace, and then all we would have to do to make the switch statement stop is just not type anything and put this. And that'll get it out of the switch statement, and it'll continue on. So that's sort of how that works. Or we could actually just type another case. We could do case 2. And then we do the same thing. Control C, Control V. Now, typically what I would do is I would put enter. Whoops, I am messing things up. I would do mine like this. That way it's a little easier to keep track of what's going on, so it's kind of, and I would do enter, so you can kind of see it a little easier. But basically, we could just do this for every one of these. February, and there we go. We could do all of them. We just do different case numbers. Now, do keep in mind that as far as this is concerned, you can't do like the numbers that you put for the cases. This is one reason that the switch statement is very limited, because you can't put anything but just integer numbers. So basically, it has to be the variable types that you can use is a byte, short, int, long, and then a char. Those are the only ones that you can really use. You can use chars if you want to, because you could do, let's say that you have month, month acronym or something, or month letter that it begins with. I don't know, something like that you're using. And remember that a char is just a single character. It's nothing more than just one character. So you could just do A, or you could do capital A, or you could do this, or you could do any character that you want to use. But that is just really hard to do. It's complicated because you have both lowercase and uppercase characters, and there's just a bajillion of them. And the uses for that is not many. So the only other option is integers, because you can't really do decimals for this. I don't think so. I don't know. I'd have to check. If you want to check on your own time, go ahead. But I'm pretty sure you can't use decimals. I may be wrong. You may be able to use true-false statements, but since you really only have 2 options for that, it'd be better to use an if statement. So if true, else else would be false, so just use an if statement for that and you're good to go. It'd literally be one calculation anyway. It's a lot easier to write. So that's one reason switch statements aren't that useful, because you can only do integers and char values. But anyway, let's say we go through all of this. We write out all of the numbers and stuff, and then we get to the very end. We have case 12 colon and this, and we have December. And let's say that we want to do, because with the if statements, I talked about the else being sort of like the error catcher. Well, we want an error catcher for the switch statement as well. The error catcher in this case is going to be the word default. And you need to make sure that you spell it right, unlike me, who can't spell anything, apparently, at all. There we go. So if it's pink, you're good to go. Add a colon, and then all you have to do is type the code that you want to happen if there's an error. So in this case, invalid month number. So what'll happen is, we've only technically got 3 here, 1, 2, and 12, but let's just say that between 2 and 12 we have all of the others. So if we type any other number besides 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, or 12, we type any other number except for those, we'll go straight to default. Because what'll happen is the switch will say, it'll look at what month number is. It'll say, okay, month number is this. Okay, well, if that's the case, then it'll go through the list, see which one it matches. If it doesn't match any of them, it'll go to default. And you don't actually have to have a default statement if you don't want to. I mean, if that's what you wanted to do, you could even do you could just do that. You don't even have to put anything in the default statement. You don't have to have the default statement at all. But if you do want to use it, there it is. That's how you do it. So let's go ahead and run this, and we'll see what happens. So let's type 0. Invalid month number. Okay, cool. That works. Now let's type 1. Let's see what happens, right? January, February. What's going on? It went through every one of them. That's not what it's supposed to do. Well, this is sort of something else that can be useful with the switch statement, because it's got its pros and it's got its cons. But what you can do with a switch statement is cause it to sort of go through. It kind of will drop through the different cases. So you can tell it where to start, and then it will just keep dropping through them until you give it a command to stop. So usually what you're going to want to do is type the break command in every single one of these, and this is sort of the command to, okay, stop. So this doesn't work just in switch statements. This will actually work in if statements and loops and any other statements that you want. Basically what it'll do is it'll stop whatever it's doing and go on to the next line, essentially. So in the case of a switch statement, what would happen normally is it would go straight to case 2 once it's done this one. Because remember, our analyzation thing is up here. So it's not analyzing anymore after this. We could have if statements in here if we wanted to, or even another embedded switch statement. But really, there's no way to tell it to start analyzing again on this stuff. So it's just going to keep going through these unless we have a break statement. If we do have a break statement, it's going to stop and it's going to go to the next line. The next line is not going to be this one because it's going to stop this whole switch statement. Because that's what's executing. It's executing a switch statement. So it's going to stop the switch statement and it's going to go to the line down here. The line's down here. So let's do this and I'll show you how this works. So if I do 1, January, that's it. That's all it did. Now if I go to 2, it's going to do all of them again because it's just dropping straight through them. Well, I don't see how this could be useful, you may be asking. Well, let's say for whatever reason that all of a sudden we have 3 months named the same month. Well, let's actually do this. Let's do March, because March is easier to type. And it's an actual word. Let's also do case 3. Let's get rid of this break statement. Actually, no, we need the break statement there. So what I'm going to do is put the break statement on the 3. So what's going to happen is March, March, March. That's it. So it's just going to say March 3 times. But even better, what we can do is we can actually just completely delete all of the code inside of these. Okay, well that kind of defeats the whole purpose of having the case there. No, it doesn't. Because what it's going to do is it doesn't actually print out any of this part. So it's going to say, okay, if it's 1, skip down to the next line. Okay, skip down to the next line. Do this. So what we could do is you can use this whole dropping down technique to actually not even have to write code for some of the cases. You just literally leave it blank and you just have it drop down to the part that you want it to start executing code at, which would usually be the last one. So because if 3 is the last number that you would need to have say the same thing, then you just have everything before 3 drop down straight to 3. And then you use the break command at 3 to get out of that so it doesn't drop down anymore. So what would happen is we would only have it print out March 1 time. There we go. So if we do 2, same thing will happen. And if we do 3, the same thing will happen. Because it's just dropping down on 1, straight to 2, to 3, then it'll execute code. Hopefully that makes sense. Now, we could just do break here. And we could do a break here just for habit's sake, but technically that's not necessary because the last line is just getting out of the switch statement, so it doesn't really make any sense to put a break statement, though I usually do. And I mean other people I guess don't really do this because it's completely pointless, but I put it there anyway just for habit's sake, just to make sure that I put it there, because it's with all of the others. So that's just me. I'm just a little different, but anyway, you can. That's kind of sort of how the switch statement works. Pretty much everything. Just again, make sure that you are careful that you do add the break statements where necessary if you're using the switch statement, because otherwise you will get that whole falling through thing to happen. But again, it's very useful, so just have to kind of play with it and see how you want it to work. Hopefully this was a decent tutorial for everyone. I do apologize again for some of my rambling and the fact that I kind of got some of my words mixed up. But you got to give me a little prop. No, that doesn't even make sense. You got to give me some credit because I have talked pretty much non-stop for about an hour now, and my mouth is starting to hurt a little bit. So anyway, I will see you all in another tutorial, and thanks for watching. Oh, of course, feedback will be appreciated. If you have any specific requests for tutorials, that'd be great. I have gotten some people to turn some stuff in, and I'm not going to guarantee that I will do as you ask. I'm not going to say, okay, just because you give me a request doesn't mean I'm going to do it. Now, I don't want to turn people off from doing that. I'm just, because some people have said, hey, you should make a tutorial on how to do cooking or something. I'm like, no, because I can't cook. So, and some people have said, I don't know, you should do really silly tutorials on how to tie your shoelaces but do it really badly, or how to go to the bathroom or something like that. But there's already channels out there for that kind of thing. I don't want to copy their ideas. There's already how-to videos for really terrible things, and and they just do a really bad job at it. So that I don't want to copy other people's ideas. So I'm just saying stuff like that I may or may not do, but I will take your ideas in consideration. Also, if you think I did something wrong in the tutorial itself, let me know so I can fix it. And perfect. Okay, I was able to talk for an additional amount of time to get the tutorial over exactly 1 hour. Okay, I will leave you all, and goodbye. Yes, 1 hour.